Good Tvach, Shavua Tov, a good week to everyone. I was asked by a few people, being that they were unable to get to shul today, to somehow relay over the message what we spoke about earlier today in shul. We did have a minyan. We had a very nice sized crowd. Even with everything going on, we took many precautions, of course, and everything was really nice. But now I'd like to share with you what I shared earlier today, and hopefully this message will be meaningful to you and practical to you in the situation that we find ourselves right now. The message basically is very simple. Follow Yiddishkeit and you will live long. That's it. Follow Yiddishkeit and you'll live long. Out of the many different things we're being told now, it seems that to me that the number one message that we're told is to make sure to wash your hands very, very well. You know, talking about washing your hands, if you live a Torah and Yiddishkeit lifestyle, you know about washing your hands. Before you get out of bed in the morning, you already have water prepared by your bed next to you so you can wash your hands. When you get dressed in the morning and you touch parts of your body that normally are covered, you wash your hands. Before you pray, you wash your hands. Before you eat, you wash your hands. Before you say grace after meal, you wash your hands. You cut your nails, your toenails, you wash your hands. You go to take a shower, a bath, a mikvah, swimming, you wash your hands. And I probably missed a bunch of times that we wash our hands. We're always washing our hands. Of course, now there's a little, we're doing it a little bit differently. We have to be more concerned to wash our hands a little bit differently. Not all the washing of hands that we mentioned are always washing the same, sometimes a little, sometimes a whole, sometimes different orders. But the concept is that we're always washing our hands if you live a Torah lifestyle. You may be familiar with a terrible disease called malaria. You might also be familiar with a Jewish curse, chalaria. That's what it is. It's actually malaria. You might be familiar with that as a zachalaria. That's what it's actually talking about. And in fact, in Eastern Europe, when chalaria was going around, it was a lot less in the Jewish community, and the non-Jews thought that the Jews placed a curse upon them. Well, in truth, what happened was that the Jews were always washing their hands because religiously we're always washing our hands for many different reasons that we mentioned a bunch, and it helped stop the spread of this terrible disease, as is true with many things, like we're talking about a virus now, that one of the main things we should do is proper washing of the hands, and that will help stop the spread of the virus. So you see, follow Yiddishkeit and it will be good for you. You follow Yiddishkeit and you live long. I'll make mention of a few mitzvahs in the Torah that we see this idea, but it's true for every mitzvah. Mitzvahs that I will not mention as well. So just take a look at 3 different mitzvahs, just briefly, just for a moment. In the mitzvah of mezuzah, we're taught that putting a mezuzah on our doorpost of our home protects us when we are home, and when we're not at home, it still protects us. The mitzvah of tzedakah. Tzedakah, we are taught that Mekarev says that Geula, it brings closer the redemption. I'll get to some of that a little bit in a few moments. But also we're taught that tzedakah tatzil mimaves, our rabbis teach us that by giving of charity, we are saved from death. Charity really brings us many blessings. Also, learning Torah. When we study Torah, it brings us blessings. You know, it is interesting that in the 1980s, the Rebbe came out with a campaign about learning Maimonides every day. And it was basically a 3-track system, making it available that anybody and everybody can learn the laws of the Rambam. And you either learn 3 chapters a day, and in this way you complete all the learning in just under a year. Or if that's too much learning to be able to be done in one day, you can learn just 1 chapter, and then it will just take you 3 times as long, basically based on the daily cycle. Every 3 years, the 3-chapter people and the 1-chapter people meet up again and restart the cycle. And then there is learning Sefer HaMitzvahs, as the Maimonides doesn't go into the details of the mitzvahs, but just enumerates all the mitzvahs, and this is broken up based on the schedule of learning of the 3 chapters a day. It's interesting. The Rebbe spoke about a lot of different important points about this. For example, one of the things the Rebbe mentioned is about Jewish unity, that we're all learning the same thing. We see this every Shabbos. Every Shabbos, we're all learning the same Torah portion. You can walk into a shul anywhere in the world, and when you walk in Shabbos morning, you know where they're going to be reading from. You know what the discussion is about. So here's the same idea. If we're all learning the same chapters from Maimonides, the laws of the Torah, this brings about an aspect of unity. But also the Rebbe brings down that the Maimonides himself mentions how he breaks up the study of all the different laws of the Torah, how many sections that he breaks it up into. And it is the same gematria, it's the same numerical value of the word machla, which means a disease. In other words, says the Rebbe, that we see that by learning Torah in general, but also by learning the laws of the Torah as Maimonides goes through all 613 mitzvahs, we are able to, so to speak, have that antidote, the medicine, to be able to fix the disease, perhaps even before it happens. So by learning Rambam, by learning Torah, we are able to bring ourselves blessings of health. And so it's true with all mitzvahs of the Torah, that the more we study the Torah, the more that we do the mitzvahs of the Torah, the more blessings we bring for ourselves. I only mentioned a few mitzvahs. There are many other mitzvahs that we know certain health or benefits. Here we're talking about health and long life. But it's true of every mitzvah, whether we know about this or not, any mitzvah we can. You know, we're talking about the washing of the hands. It's interesting that in the mid-1880s, there was a doctor, a Jewish doctor, by the name of Dr. Semmelweis. This Dr. Semmelweis was born in Buda, later to be called Budapest, and was a doctor in Vienna. And he came up with this theory about washing your hands. At that time, doctors did not wash their hands between patients and sterilize. And he was working in a hospital, and he noticed that there were two wards giving birth, two birthing units. And he noticed in his ward, where the doctors worked, there was a much higher fatality rate. Many babies were dying. While in the other ward, where the nurses worked, it was a much lower rate and a much higher rate of survival. Mothers only wanted to give birth in that ward. And he tried to figure out what it was. And he had the thought that perhaps it has to do with the washing of the hands. I'm not going to go into all the details of this. It's a very interesting read. You can do the search it on your own. Online, you'll read up about him. Very, very interesting. Unfortunately, he died at the young age of 47 years old because they basically drove him to his death. They drove him out of Vienna because he went against the common knowledge of medicine at the time. He went back to his hometown. He then eventually wrote a book on this. Once it was out in the open what he taught, they thought he was crazy. He basically went crazy from this. They took him, they forcefully put him into a straitjacket and locked him up in a crazy house. He actually ended up getting a cut in the scuffle. And it seems that he probably died of an infection that perhaps he wouldn't have had they been following his advice of making sure to sterilize and washing of the hands. And a lot more important details on this story if you go back and read the story, which I'm not going to get into now. But the point is that the washing of the hands was so important. And in fact, one of the things that they made fun of him at that time was that, oh, he's Jewish. He probably has this thing, the Jews are always washing their hands. But guess what? It probably was true. He probably had this superstition of washing your hands. But he didn't just go about it because he thought, Jews are always washing their hands. He looked at it and he figured it out basically by comparing different things that were taking place in the hospitals at the time. If you follow Yiddishkeit, we will always have great blessings of great health and longevity. All blessings. But this is what the topic is for today. In this week's Torah portion, in the Torah portion of Kisisa that we read, we know there's a concept in Yiddishkeit. There's always somewhat of a hint from the Torah portion to what's going on in the world. And there are multiple connections and hints in this week's Torah portion to what's going on now. And I just want to highlight two little things that I think will have a message. First of all, in the beginning of this week's Torah portion, in the Torah is talking to the Kohanim, to the priests. The Kohen has to wash his hands before he begins his service in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Mishkan and the tabernacle, and later in the sanctuary. And in chapter 30, verse 21, there it says, "V'rachatzu yedeim v'ragleim," and they should wash their hands and feet and they will not die. It's interesting. Again, it's talking about something else, talking about the priests, but I think there's an interesting correlation here that in this week's Torah portion, it tells us about washing of the hands. But the big story in this week's parsha is actually about the golden calf. What happened at the golden calf? When you take a look at this, I think there's a practical lesson in our life day to day. Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jewish people, now that we just heard the 10 commandments from God, I'm going to go up the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. They start to count on day 40, when they thought was day 40, which was actually day 39. They freak out. They totally lose it. Moshe Rabbeinu, he died. It's over. What's going on? We need a leader. What happened in the mistake? Well, they counted the day he went up to go up the mountain as day 1. We sometimes do that. For example, if someone's born on Tuesday, the bris for that baby boy would be on Tuesday, providing that the baby's healthy. Because we count the day they're born as day 1, and then you go 8 days later would be the next Tuesday. But here, the day he went up was not to be counted because it had to be complete 40 days and nights. And so the day 1 was the next day. And Aaron, Moshe Rabbeinu's brother, Aaron HaKohen, tries to stall them in order to wait because he knows that they made a mistake, but they won't listen to him. And again, there's more details to the story that you should read up on. But he tries to stall them, and he can't. And they go and make this Egel Hazav, this golden calf to which they worship. A fascinating whole thing about the idol itself is a whole fascinating part of the story. But basically, the Jewish people went into panic mode. And when they went into panic mode, they made a terrible, terrible mistake because they went into panic mode and they couldn't wait a couple of hours. Had they waited and listened, and they would have been calm, and remember there's a God in this world, and God is in full control, everything would have been okay. Matter of fact, we find other times in the Torah also where the Jewish people, either as a whole or certain leaders of the Jewish people, went into panic mode, and it did not turn out well. Every time they go into panic mode, it doesn't turn out well. We're not going to discuss those other things, but other stories to look at. There's a story with Shaul HaMelech, King Saul. There's a story with the Jewish people, the spies. Again, they go into panic mode. No reason to get nervous, no reason to sweat, no reason to get all bent out of shape. We don't have to go into panic mode. Everything is fine. There's a God in this world, and he's in full control, and everything is fine. This time, we're coming now from a few days from Purim, and in a few weeks will be by Pesach. We know that Purim, our rabbis tell us, this time period, we're going Migeula Legeula, from the redemption of the story of Purim, where the Jews had salvation and saved from an almost terrible calamity, to the story of Pesach, where there, in the holiday, the Jewish people were saved, the Jewish people had Geula, they had redemption. And we're in a time period now of redemption. And hopefully we'll now with this energy of redemption, we'll very, very soon go to the ultimate redemption with the coming of Mashiach. And we're now talking about redemption energy. But if we look back at the story of Purim, and we spoke about this at our Purim party, if you look at the story of Purim, what did Mordechai, the leader of the Jewish people of that time, do when they learned of the decree? He himself was an advisor to the king, with great grace in the eyes of the king, because he saved the king's life from an attempted suicide, from attempted murder. They tried to knock him off, and from Big Son Assuerus tried to knock off Achashverosh, and Mordechai saved his life. And yet you don't. And in addition to that, the queen Esther herself was Jewish, of course, and she, we know, found grace in the king's eyes. But we don't find that Mordechai tried to use any of the political pull and the connections that the Jewish people had at that time. What does Mordechai do? He gathers together all the Jewish people. They fast, they pray, they do teshuvah. They basically work on themselves on the spiritual aspect of everything. They build and rebond that connection with Hashem. They reconnect with God, learning Torah, doing mitzvahs. And then he goes through the normal order of the world to do things, where Esther makes a famous party with Achashverosh and Haman, and the story works out so well for us. We see from this that as a Jew, we have to recognize that we have to do things in the Torah way. The Rebbe has a fascinating talk also on the holiday of Purim, where he talks about this quite explicitly this concept. And he says that the verse says, Atem netzavim hayom kulchem, today you are all standing before God. And the Rebbe goes on to talk about how it could be that in the world is shaking, they're trembling, they don't know what's going on, they're all bent out of shape, they're shaking at their knees. But the Jews, he says, stand strong. How do we stand strong? And I'm taking the Rebbe's teachings a little bit, explaining it in my own words. But the Rebbe says that if you come to an Eis Sarah, a very serious time, a troubling time, it's a scary time, or it's like Zera, maybe there's some type of decree from heaven, God forbid, we should not worry. And the Rebbe goes on to say that the first thing a Jew has to do is not to go through the normal, natural ways that the nations of the world will go. Look, the Jewish people, our story is not a natural story. Naturally speaking, we wouldn't have been here many times. We're a supernatural people. Somehow we're still here, right? And so what we need to do, the first thing we need to do is, as our rabbis teach us, we have to look into our own behaviors. We have to take a look into ourselves and see, where can I be a better Jew? How can I learn more Torah? How can I do more mitzvahs? How can I be a better person? And the very first thing we need to do is to build on our spiritual, our godly connections. We mentioned before a few mitzvahs. Mitzvah mezuzah. Is the mezuzah on every door of my home? Is every mezuzah hanging the way it's supposed to be? When was the last time I checked the mezuzahs? I will tell you that the average time that I go to check mezuzahs on a home, I don't care how religious the family, or whatever the case may be, the average time that I go through a house to check mezuzahs, you usually find something that can be done better. Sometimes there's a mezuzah that is checked, that there was no way to know unless you gave it to the sofer to find out that it was no good. Sometimes for some reason, something happens, a mezuzah gets knocked off the wall, somebody doesn't realize. All types of things happen. The average time, I would say probably 80% of the time, there is something that can be fixed in regards to the mezuzah. Talk about giving up tzedakah. Do I make sure that am I careful to make sure that every single day I give a few coins or a few dollars to charity? I put a nickel into the pushka, I put $1 into the pushka to make sure that every single day I get tzedakah. And then on Friday to give a little extra for Shabbos. Am I so careful that I'm giving something to charity on a regular basis? We mentioned about study of Torah. Can I add another class? Can I add another chabrusa? Because there is something in the community a class in the shul that I can join. And there are so many other mitzvahs that each person has to think to themselves, where can I be better? In what way can I better what I'm doing? And so I think that the message is very, very strong and very, very clear that at a time like this, if we follow Yiddishkeit, we'll have long life. Things will be very, very good for us. And do it the very first thing we need to do is on the spiritual level. And then, says the Rebbe in this talk on Purim, he says, you will be wildly successful because you made that connection with God in your Yiddishkeit. Then when you do what you're supposed to be doing on the physical realm, in the physical way, natural thing, different things that we have to do. And now again, I only mentioned washing your hands, but all the different things that we need to do, the different precautions. You will be wildly successful because this will although you're doing things in the natural order, you're not going to have natural success. You're going to have supernatural success because Hashem is going to be there with you, bringing us the success. So we have to make sure to stay calm. God is in control. Everything is fine. Everything is good. Do more Torah mitzvahs and then do the things that we need to do on the physical level. And with the power of us adding in our Torah mitzvahs, we will be wildly successful in bringing health to ourselves and everybody, please God, every person, every individual, and every community, everybody here and around the world will be very, very healthy. And Mashiach will come very soon. We will no longer know of any type of sickness or illness or any types of problems, and everybody will only have good things and gesundheit and freiligkeit, very healthy and very happy. Shavua Tov, a good Tavach. Have a wonderful week.